What if I told you that fruit trees have thrived in the coldest inhabited places on Earth for thousands of years? You've been told that your winters are too harsh for growing fruit. Local nurseries sell varieties of apple trees that die at the first serious frost. But Siberian orchards bear fruit in frosts of -46 degrees Celsius. Alaskan settlers harvest fruit after 8 months of frozen ground. Canadian farmers grow fruits that their grandfathers brought from Russia a century ago. The problem is not your climate. The problem is that no one told you about the trees that actually thrive there. Stay. Because the first tree was bred specifically for such conditions. Here are 13 extreme cold fruit trees that no one plants. Welcome to the Proven Plants channel, where we unearth growing knowledge that modern horticultural science has forgotten. If you believe your cold climate can produce more fruit than you've been told, then you've come to the right place. USDA hardiness zone maps, first published in 1960, cemented the belief that certain fruits could not be grown in zones below 4. Modern revisions of 2012 still underestimate the stability of microclimates in continental regions. The University of Minnesota documented the widespread loss of commercial apple orchards following the polar vortex of 2014. Temperatures dropped below -34 degrees Celsius, destroying thousands of hectares of orchards overnight. At the same time, in Yakutsk, the coldest major city on Earth with temperatures down to -64 degrees, the local population still grows blue honeysuckle berries. Agricultural officials of the early 20th century gave priority to European varieties, ignoring indigenous and Asian species that were already adapted to continental frosts. Dr. Bob Boers of the University of Saskatchewan has made a genetic breakthrough by creating varieties of honeysuckle that can survive temperatures of -44 degrees Celsius. His work on hybridization proved that breeders could exceed natural hardiness limits through a scientific approach. Ethnobotanical research from the Smithsonian Institution documents indigenous food systems that predate industrial agriculture by thousands of years. This forgotten agricultural knowledge holds solutions for today's cold climate gardeners. Subscribe and write in the comments what hardiness zone you garden in. We'll now move on to this list. Ranked from garden-worthy to revolutionary. There are 13 fruit trees that laugh at the winters that kill everything your local nurseries sell. Some thrive in the second zone, where temperatures drop below -46 degrees Celsius. These trees have been bred for Siberia, Saskatchewan, and the Arctic Circle, while nurseries ship seedlings from Oregon and California. You don't live in a climate that is too cold for fruit. You live in a climate that calls for the right fruit. Number 13. Chokeberry, the superfruit no one recognizes. Walk past chokeberries at any farmer's market and most shoppers have no idea what they're looking at. Laboratory tests have revealed that chokeberries contain the highest levels of antioxidants of any fruit ever tested. A 2004 study published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry recorded chokeberry antioxidant activity at over 16,000 micromoles per 100 grams. The shrub survives in the third zone at temperatures down to -40 degrees Celsius. Native to eastern North America, chokeberries evolved for precisely the conditions that kill imported fruit trees. Chokeberry grows from 1.5 to 2.5 meters in height as a multi-stemmed shrub, requiring virtually no care. Full sun or partial shade works equally well, and moist or dry soil works as well. One plant bears fruit without a pollination partner, although planting two increases yield. The dark purple berries appear in late summer and actually improve in flavor when frosted or processed. Number 12. Nanjing cherry, Manchurian survivor. Every cold climate gardener has watched standard cherry trees die after a brutal winter. Nanjing cherry trees survive winters that would kill these trees 3 times in a row. Native to China, Korea, and the Manchurian region of Northeast Asia, this tree has evolved in some of the continent's harshest winters. Hardy to Zone 2 with temperatures down to -46 degrees Celsius, Nanjing cherry produces true cherries where cherries should not exist. The tree grows as a large shrub or small tree, reaching 3.5 meters in height. Plant 2 trees for cross-pollination, and fruiting begins within 2 to 3 years. Beautiful pink flowers cover the branches in early spring before the leaves emerge. Small, sweet and sour cherries ripen in midsummer and hang in such abundance that the branches bend under the weight. Cold climate nurseries use Nanjing cherry as a rootstock for grafting other cherry varieties. For anyone who assumed cherry pie required a mild climate, Nanjing cherries bring the premier ingredient to your Zone 2 homestead. Number 11. Russian mulberry, immigrant survivor. When Russian Mennonite communities fled persecution in the late 19th century, they brought more than their faith to the Canadian prairies. They brought fruit trees that they knew would survive in conditions that European varieties could not cope with. Records of Mennonite migration in the 1870s show how communities moved from Ukraine to Manitoba, bringing white mulberry varieties selected for drought and frost resistance. Selected over generations to survive harsh continental winters, these mulberries can withstand Zone 3 temperatures down to -40 degrees Celsius. They grow as shrubs or trees depending on pruning and produce abundant sweet berries within 2 to 3 years of planting. Fresh mulberries are not available in grocery stores because the fruits are too delicate to ship. Growing your own is the only way to experience truly ripe mulberries. The historic mulberry trees planted by those original Russian settlers are still producing fruit on prairie homesteads more than a century later. For anyone who wants the sweet berries that no store can provide, Russian mulberries offer immigrant resilience. Number 10. Sea buckthorn, a Soviet secret. When you can't ship citrus fruits to remote outposts across Siberia, you find another source of vitamin C. Soviet agricultural scientists identified sea buckthorn as that source. Berries contain 7 times more vitamin C than oranges. The Altai Research Institute began cultivating sea buckthorn in the 1950s for nutrition programs. It was later used in the diets of astronauts during early space missions. The shrub tolerates the cold of the 3rd zone down to -40 degrees Celsius. It grows in salt, sand, and soil so poor that nothing else can survive. The root system fixes nitrogen from the air, essentially improving the terrible soil over time. Male and female plants are needed for fruiting, so plant at least 1 male for every 6 to 8 females. The thorns are aggressive, so wear heavy gloves while harvesting. This harvest is worth the effort. Sea buckthorn oil commands premium prices in the skincare industry. For anyone with terrible soil and brutal winters who still wants fruit production, sea buckthorn thrives where everything else dies. Number 9. Evans cherry, Edmonton discovery. Dr. Les Kerr wasn't looking for a breakthrough in cool climate fruit growing when he noticed a cherry tree surviving Edmonton winters that killed other varieties. But this is exactly what he found in the 1980s. Discovered in Edmonton, Alberta, this selection of tart cherries survives Zone 3 winters that drop to -40 degrees Celsius. The University of Saskatchewan tested and promoted the Evans cherry after confirming its exceptional hardiness. The tree grows from 3.5 to 4.5 meters in height and produces reliably year after year. Unlike many cherry varieties, Evans is self-fertile, meaning a single tree produces fruit without a pollination partner. Sour cherries are pie cherries, can cherries, and jam cherries. This tart flavor develops best in cool climates, making northern cherries excellent for baking. Evans cherries fill this role where standard tart cherries freeze to the ground. Fruiting begins within 3 to 4 years after planting. For anyone who wants to bake a tart cherry pie from their own northern tree, Evans cherries make it possible in climates that kill Montmorency. Number 8. American plum, native. When European settlers brought their beloved plum trees to the Great Plains, they watched them die. The trees that survived were already there. The American plum had flourished on the prairies for thousands of years before their arrival. Archaeological evidence from sites on the Great Plains shows American plum seeds in indigenous storages dating back more than 1,000 years. Native to New England to the Rocky Mountains, this plum evolved precisely for the conditions that kill imported varieties. Hardy. To the third zone at -40 degrees Celsius, it laughs at the winters that devastate European and Asian plums. The tree grows from 4.5 to 6 meters and forms thickets that produce abundantly once established. Plant 2 different trees for cross-pollination. Indigenous peoples have relied on the American plum as a food source for thousands of years, drying the fruit for winter nutrition and making it into fruit skins. The taste is tart and rich, ideal for jam and baking. Wildlife also depends on the American plum tree for food and shelter. For anyone who wants an indigenous fruit perfectly adapted to northern prairie conditions, the American plum has proven itself for thousands of years. Number 7. Elderberry, an ally of the immune system. Sales of elderberry syrup have exploded in recent years as research confirms what traditional medicine has always said. The dark purple berries support immune function during cold and flu season. A 2019 meta-analysis in the Journal of Complementary Therapies in Medicine found that elderberry extract shortened the duration of flu symptoms by about 2 to 4 days. American elderberry achieves Zone 3 frost hardiness with careful cultivar selection. York and Nova are 2 varieties bred for northern production and reliable cold survival. Adams is another proven performer in harsh conditions. The shrub grows as a multi-stemmed plant, reaching from 2.5 to 3.5 meters in height. Partial shade and moist soil that other fruits reject are ideal for elderberries. Plant 2 different varieties for cross-pollination, and production begins within 2 to 3 years. The berries must be cooked before consumption because raw elderberries cause digestive upset. Cooking turns them into syrup, wine, jam, and pie filling. Commercial elderberry production cannot meet demand. For anyone who wants immune support grown in their own cold climate garden, elderberry delivers medicine and nutrition from one plant. Number 6. Hardy pears, Manchurian hybrid. Standard pear trees such as Bartlett and Anjou die in Zone 3 winters, but crossing them with Manchurian pear creates varieties that thrive where their parents freeze. University of Saskatchewan fruit breeders have spent decades crossing the hardy Ussuri pear with European pears prized for their fruit quality. The program began in 1940 and released varieties like Jur in 1978 after decades of selection. The resulting varieties, such as Jur, Early Golden, and Golden Spice, survive temperatures of the third zone down to -40 degrees Celsius. Some produce fruit with the texture of an Asian pear that remains crisp. Others are softened, like European pears, for fresh consumption. Resistance to fire blight comes as a bonus from Manchurian genetics. Plant 2 different varieties for cross-pollination. The trees require full sun and well-drained soil, like any pear tree. Fruiting begins within 4 to 6 years. For anyone who assumed that pear picking required a mild climate, the hardy pears developed in Saskatchewan prove otherwise. Number 5. Lingonberry, Arctic carpet. Across Sweden, Finland, and northern Russia, lingonberries cover the forest floor and produce reliably through winters that would kill almost any other fruit crop. IKEA introduced lingonberry jam to millions of people who never realized that the fruit grew wild across the Arctic. Hardy to Zone 2 temperatures below -46 degrees Celsius, lingonberries survive conditions that few cultivated fruits can withstand. The low-growing shrub reaches only 30 to 45 centimeters in height and spreads, forming productive colonies over time. Acidic soil is required, as for blueberries, with a pH level of 4.0. Partial shade is ideal for planting lingonberries under taller fruiting shrubs and trees. Evergreen foliage provides winter interest when everything else looks bare. 2 harvests per season are possible in good conditions. Tart red berries make exceptional jam and sauce for meat dishes. For anyone who wants fruit production in the second zone, where almost nothing survives, lingonberries have proven themselves across the Arctic for thousands of years. Number 4. Gooseberry, forgotten pie. Every American garden contained gooseberry bushes a century ago. Gooseberry pie, gooseberry fool, and gooseberry jam appeared on tables across the country. Then the government banned gooseberries, and everyone forgot about its existence. In the early 20th century, Gooseberries and currants were identified as alternative hosts for white pine blister rust, a disease that threatened the logging industry. Federal prohibition was introduced in 1911 under the Plant Quarantine Act to protect the interests of loggers. These bans were lifted decades ago, but gardeners have never replanted what their grandparents grew. Gooseberries survived the cold of the third zone at -40 degrees Celsius without special care. The thorny shrub produces for decades after establishment. Self-fertile plants mean that one plant produces fruit. The flavor ranges from tart to sweet depending on ripeness. Gooseberry pie rivals any berry pie in quality. For anyone who wants to grow what their great-great-grandfathers enjoyed before government regulations wiped it out of American gardens, gooseberries bring back a forgotten flavor. Number 3. Siberian apple tree, genetic ancestor. Without the apple tree, there would be no frost-resistant apples. This small fruited tree from Siberia and northern China provided the genetics that made northern apple growing possible. Hardy to Zone 2 temperatures as low as -46 degrees Celsius, this tree survives cold weather that kills every apple variety at your local nursery. Apple breeders have been crossing Siberian apples with food apples to create frost-resistant varieties for over a century. Long Rescue and dozens of other cold-climate apples carry Siberian genetics. The development of the Haralson apple tree at the University of Minnesota in 1922 became the cornerstone of cool-climate apple breeding. The small fruits make exceptional jelly and cider. Beautiful white flowers cover the tree in spring, making it decorative as well as productive. The tree pollinates other varieties of apple trees, expanding your harvest options. Growing to 6 to 12 meters, it becomes a significant presence in the garden. For anyone who wants the genetic basis that made growing apples in cold climates possible, the Siberian apple is the ancestor that started it all. Number 2. Serviceberry, the indigenous superfruit. Long before the arrival of European settlers, the indigenous peoples of northern North America collected serviceberry as a critical food source. They mixed the dried berries with bison meat and tallow to make pemmican, the original energy bar that fueled cross-continental travel. Ethnographic records of pemmican production were shared by the Cree and Métis peoples, allowing fur trading expeditions to travel thousands of miles. Hardy to Zone 2 at -46 degrees Celsius, this native shrub has evolved specifically for the conditions where you live. Called Saskatoon in Canada and Juneberry in the United States, the fruits ripen earlier than all other tree fruits each season. Its higher antioxidant content than blueberries makes it a true superfruit. The taste is reminiscent of blueberries with almond notes from the small seeds. Saskatoon's commercial orchards across the Canadian prairies prove that this crop works at scale. The shrub grows like a small tree, reaching 4.5 to 6 meters. Self-fertile varieties are produced from a single plant, although cross-pollination increases yield. For anyone who wants a native fruit perfectly adapted to the northern conditions that indigenous peoples have relied on for millennia, serviceberry delivers the first harvest every season. Number 1. Honeysuckle, Siberian breakthrough. The University of Saskatchewan didn't just find a cold, hardy fruit. They created a breeding program specifically to develop the ultimate cold climate berry. Honeysuckle, also called honeyberry, is the result of decades of crossbreeding blue honeysuckle selections from Siberia, Japan, and northern Canada. Hardy to Zone 2 and beyond, honeysuckle survives temperatures approaching -46 degrees Celsius without damage. Flowers tolerate late spring frosts, which destroy apple and cherry blossoms. This means reliable production even in years when other fruits fail completely. The berries ripen before the strawberries, providing fresh fruit before everything else in the garden. Flavor profiles range from sweet to tart, depending on the variety, with some tasting like blueberries and others like raspberries or grapes. The University of Saskatchewan released varieties such as Indigo Jam in 1999, Aurora and the Boreal series between 2016 and 2188. The shrubs grow from 1.5 to 2 meters in height and produce within 2 to 3 years after planting. For anyone who wants a fruit bred from the ground up for the coldest inhabited regions on Earth, honeysuckle is the ultimate cold climate producer. These 13 fruit trees survive winters that kill everything your local nurseries sell. Some thrive in the second zone, where temperatures drop below -46 degrees Celsius. Indigenous peoples and Russian settlers knew these trees when University Extension Services still told gardeners that fruit trees could not survive extreme cold. Global data shows that honeysuckle acreage in Canada increased by more than 300% between 2010 and 2020. More than 80% of North America's nursery stock is produced in mild climates such as Oregon and California, limiting genetic suitability to cold regions. You don't live in a climate that is too cold for fruit. You live in a climate that requires the right fruit. Start with honeysuckle and serviceberry because they are perfectly adapted to northern conditions. Add Nanjing cherries for true cherry production where cherries shouldn't exist. Plant sea buckthorn in that terrible place where nothing else survives. Try Evans cherries for a tart cherry pie from your own third zone tree. For 3 years, you will harvest fruits that your neighbors consider impossible in your climate. If this video has shown you what's possible in cold climates, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments which fruit tree you want to plant first.